Good morning, crew, and welcome back to Life Drawing with Miss Liberty. In last week's lesson, I introduced you to seeing the world as an artist. We broke down some subjects into basic shapes so that it made it easier for us to draw them. We used shapes like circles, squares, and triangles, made them three-dimensional by making cylinders, cubes, pyramids, and cones, and we used all sorts of different types of lines while we were sketching. We're going to use those same skills today to draw some everyday objects in more detail and take them a little bit further. And then later on in today's lesson, I'll introduce you to seeing the world as a scientist, where we take our sketches and add small, relevant details that'll make our pieces look more realistic. In today's lesson, you'll only need a few of the tools from your artist toolbox. You will need your sketchbook. I'd go ahead and turn it to the next blank page. And then I like to either date or label the top of the page so I know what the sketches are for when I look back at them later. And trust me, if you've got a sketchbook, you'll look at it later. You'll also need Worksheet Week 2, Section A. It'll have a black and white pear, book, and tape dispenser on it. And then last but not least, you'll need your sharpened number 2 pencil. If it is not sharp yet, please take this time, take your sharpener over a trash can, sharpen your pencil, and go ahead and get ready to warm up. For everybody else whose pencil is already sharpened, let's get started. Let's do some sketching warm-ups by making some light lines. Let's make some dark lines. Let's make some really dark lines. Let's make a small circle, a medium circle, and a big circle. Remember to hold the pencil as a sketching artist like chopsticks and not like you're writing your name. So hold it like this. Now, while you're watching me sketch, I'm going to be making lines about this dark so that you can see them. But while you're sketching, I want you to make lines so that we can barely see them. Because if I make a mistake, that's not a very good circle, right? I don't want to erase that. I just want to do it again. And then I'll get darker as I start to get what I want. And that's how we sketch without erasing. All right, so let's get our warm-ups out of our way and pull out that week 2 section A worksheet. You'll notice on the handout there are 3 different subjects in a fairly 2-dimensional, some 3-dimensional shapes. So some of them look flat and some of them look 3-dimensional. What do you notice about the subjects on the page? Well, what I want you to notice, if you look at it as an artist, is if we want to draw these subjects, we're going to break them down into basic shapes. Are there any basic shapes you notice inside the pear? Well, I see a big circle here, and you're going to go ahead and trace along with me. So we see that circle there. So go ahead and trace a circle there. And then we also see another small circle here. Go ahead and trace that circle there. And then we have a little rectangle here. And we have an eye or a football shape here. So go ahead and trace those right over the top. So now it kind of looks like a pear. We just might have to add a couple more details, like the curve here on the side, and the curve here on the side, and a little curve down here. And maybe the fact that our rectangle here is thinner down here than it is up here. And there. It looks a lot closer to a pear than it did before. What shapes do you see in our subject right here? Well, if we wanted to make it very basic, we'd just do the rectangle we see right here. Go ahead and trace that rectangle. Now you can draw a little darker here because we're tracing that rectangle, but this is a 3-dimensional rectangle or a rhombus. So we're going to go ahead and give it some sides. Now remember, we're just making a three-dimensional rectangle. So give it sides and a back. And that's as basic as we can get with our book, so it makes it easier for us to draw it. Now, if we get a little more complicated, we have our tape dispenser down here. Let's be patient with ourselves as we try to figure that out. So I'm going to start with, I see one circle here. So I'm going to trace that circle. I see this circle is pretty important, so I'm going to trace this big circle right here. And then I see a rectangle here and a triangle here. Now, our tape dispenser might look like it's not in perspective or it's not 3D, but it is just slightly. So if we add a side to all of the corners and then connect them, we've made our three-dimensional tape dispenser. All right, so once you've done that, we're going to move on to the next part. We are going to now sketch the same subjects onto this blank area as best we can, starting with the basic shapes. So let's go ahead and get started with our pear. So we're going to start by doing those two circles we did in the first part. So go ahead and get your sketching hand ready. Sketch a circle, start very lightly and build up, and then another circle on the top. We have our rectangle and we have our football. Try to make it about the same size if you can. And remember, we added those tiny details on the side. So we gave it a side and a side, and we have that little curve on the bottom there. And we remember that this is thinner on the bottom than it is on the top. And there we go. If we outline the lines that we want to see, make them a little bit darker, then I think we would be happy with our pear sketch. So let's do the same thing with the book here. So remember, we had a rhombus or a rectangle at an angle, and it has the sides in the back and a bottom. And we could add some tiny little details just by rounding the edges, because our book has round edges. And then last, most difficult, is our tape dispenser. And with that, we did a small circle, a big circle, and we had a rectangle and a triangle that connected to that rectangle. And remember, we made it three-dimensional by adding some sides. Now, if yours isn't perfect, that's okay. Mine's not perfect either. And the extra details we would add are the little feet, the outside of the tape dispenser, because what we did is kind of a skeleton of the tape dispenser. So that's the shapes that make up the form, and the form goes around the shapes. Like that. And then there we have a tape dispenser. And just darken the parts that you want to make more emphasized. And there we go. We have our tape dispenser. Now, if you're not caught up to me, feel free to take your time. Remember, for the pear, we did two circles, a little rectangle, and a football, and then we added some details. For our book, that one was pretty easy. It's the details that are going to be hard on that one. And then our tape dispenser was the most complicated one. So we started with our basic shapes, and then we added our details. Okay, crew, now that we've finished warming up, we're going to do our sketches in our sketchbook. These sketches are going to be our first drafts. In the art industry, artists get to do as many drafts as they need to before they get to their final draft or their masterpiece. So you can do as many drafts or sketches as you need to until you feel comfortable and ready to move on. So go ahead and get that pencil ready, open to the page that you have open for today's lesson, and let's talk about our subjects today. Let's get started. Here are objects that we're going to draw. I have a Sharpie or a felt point marker. I have an eraser, and I also have 2 pencil sharpeners in case your pencil sharpener is different than mine. You see that little spider going? I'm gonna let him go. I'm gonna let him go. He can go. He's not gonna harm me. Anyways, let's start with our Sharpie. So let's get our other tools out of the way. I want to draw my Sharpie in landscape. I want to draw it long like this. So I'm going to go ahead and turn my sketchbook page the same way. So first we're going to go through each subject by doing the basic shapes. So what basic shape can we use to start sketching our Sharpie? Well, I think we should start with a long rectangle. Remember to hold the pencil like an artist that's sketching. We're not writing or doing fine details. So I would say that's our Sharpie. If you want to give a little more emphasis to it, I would put a circle down here and a circle down here to let us know that the ends are rounded and not square. So let's move on to the next subject. So we have, I think the easiest one might be our pencil sharpener. So if we're looking at our pencil sharpener, let's put it in an interesting perspective. So now I can see it in a 3/4 view instead of flat, because if it was flat, it'd be pretty boring. Even this one, it'd be pretty boring flat. So we're going to put it in perspective so that we can have a more interesting drawing. So what do you see with your pencil sharpener? Well, pencil sharpener is very similar to the book because we have a rectangle on the top right here. So let's do a rectangle. And our rectangle is 3-dimensional and in perspective, so we're going to add some sides to it. A bottom and a back. So there we go. That would be our pencil sharpener. Remember, you should be doing it lighter. I'm only doing it this dark so that you can see my drawing. And so if we were to do this pencil sharpener as well, let's go ahead and put that little circle that's in there. That's an easy thing to include. And then this pencil sharpener is shaped more like a triangle than a rectangle. And I think it would be more like a pyramid. So the easiest way to draw this would be to draw the rectangle first, I think. The triangle first. And then to do the back, and like that, kind of like a wedge of cheese. So you do a cheese wedge. Because if we could see through these shapes, because they're 3-dimensional, they'd be more like this, but you don't need those lines. That's only if we could see through it. Same with our block of cheese right here. This would go like that, but we don't see that. All right, and we can go ahead and do the part where we see the pencil. And there's our basic shapes for those. All right, last would be our eraser, which is a little more complicated. There's a lot of detail going on here, but we're going to start with the basic shape. So go ahead and get that pencil there. I'm going to draw mine from the view you guys can see. So I'll say we'll call this a square, and let's put our square in perspective. So it's got sides and a back. Let's go ahead and make it so that we can see through it. So draw all those see-through lines, just like you were making a box or a cube, because the top of our there we go. There we go. The second one there. So that one's a lot more complicated. If I wanted to simplify that for you, it would be a square and this shape right here. But we were making it three-dimensional, so we added sides and a back to it, or you can go in the other direction. All right, so you should have basic shapes of a Sharpie, a pencil sharpener of some sort, and your eraser. All right, crew. Thank you for joining me for today's lesson. Next week, we're going to add form, color, and a little more detail to our pieces until they are a masterpiece and we're satisfied with what we've created. Remember to practice as much as you can. Most artists draw every day to gain the skills that they have, and it's okay to do more than one draft. Remember, our pencils have an eraser for a reason. Our sketchbook has many pages, and make sure you're having fun with it. I'll see you next week. Thank you.